little bit loud. I don't know if that's
not good. We're going.
Yeah.
So I'll just
Like how I just kind of trailed off there. I don't know if that's
try to adjust it. What is up, everybody? We are live with my boy Phil Galfond, just dealing with some standard issues. Why I should be in charge of the technical side of things is probably something left to be explored. But Phil, welcome to the show. We are very excited to have you on board.
Thank you. I'll take over tech for the next one.
Yeah, could you? Like, yeah, guys, I don't even have a Facebook password memorized, so I'm way out of the loop of what should be going on. Okay, so Phil, first of all, I'm going to mute myself in a second so that people don't have to listen to whatever this terrible sound is that's happening. But let's talk a little bit about what has been going down at RunitOnce. I don't feel like I need to introduce you or give too much. Everyone knows who you are. Everyone knows what's going on. Let's talk about what's been happening.
Okay. Well, since the last time we talked, I don't remember when that was exactly. It was pretty soon after launch, I think. The software's come a long way. I think the thing I'm most excited about is that the software is really solid now. A lot of people are really enjoying it. Whereas right after launch, it was, dealing with some bugs, working out some kinks. So that's one thing. Another kind of big thing that happened is I started playing and streaming on the site, which took some doing. I had to restrict some access to certain things that I used to have access to as a founder. And then we made me non-anonymous, so I have my own avatar, my own name, which you see when you're playing with me. And that went really well. That just ended like a week ago or so. I was in Vancouver streaming for 6 days straight. And we haven't announced it yet, but my next trip for streaming starts in about a little over a week. So I'm going to be in Mexico this time with the family. I went on my own to Vancouver, and that was no fun. You can't just leave when you have a baby, because you can't just not see a baby for 7 days. But yeah, they're coming with me, and I'm going to do it'll be 2 weeks of streaming, but I don't think I can handle every single day for 2 weeks. 6 days in a row was really hard. I don't know how these people who are just badass streamers do it day in and day out. But yeah, those are some new exciting things going on.
What was that experience like as a player on your own site, streaming to the people?
It was really cool in that, well, two separate things. Playing on the site was really cool because I've done so much designing of the site and the features and the functions, and then testing on it. But there's something like testing on it compared to playing on it for real money is a lot different. Like, for example, we have the dynamic avatars which tell you the play styles that people are playing, and we have color marking that, like every site has color marking. And when I was testing, I didn't really care. I didn't really care who was playing what style. And so I wasn't paying very much attention to those. And so I wasn't getting the use out of those features. But then playing for real, I get to. And it actually felt even better than I expected from testing, for play money. And then streaming was really cool. It was it's challenging. I think that first of all, there are always going to be there's a learning curve and setting up your overlay and everything else. I had help from a team, but even we were all just scrambling to get it together, making last minute changes. And so I would get up at 7 to start streaming at 10 and just barely started in time every day. And then it's also tough because I don't know, for me as an introvert, it's draining to be talking and on for 5, 6, 7 hours in a row. But despite that, it was fun. During it, it wasn't hard. It was fun. And then afterwards, I was just completely beat and couldn't do anything for the rest. I would finish at 4 p.m. and just be done for the day. That was it.
I feel like the PokerNews Podcast family is not going to believe that we recorded this after we recorded the intro, because we literally just did a whole segment about how draining and exhausting streaming must be for people, and how hard it is for what people don't realize about what it takes out of you really to be consistently streaming. But it's interesting because you also have been putting some stuff out on the blog, your blog really, mm-hmm. which is addressing not only your experience, but also the feedback that you've been getting from players and how you guys are integrating that, and really that you were feeling that it's shifted in a way where now when you're playing, you're feeling like, okay, this is really getting to where I want it to be. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the transition? Like, what are the major things that really feel like it's different for you now?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's with the software, part of it is just bug fixes. There were always a few things that were, small annoyances. There are a lot of, I don't know, like a lot of UX improvements that are little, but just the way that you interact with the buttons, like a simple thing like when you hover over your betting button, turns into a pointer finger rather than the arrow. Like things like that, I think actually make a big difference in the way software feels. So there's a lot of that we've been adding incrementally. In the next update or two, there'll be more of those small UX things that I think make a big difference. But really, it's just, in the latest update, the biggest change was that we added resizable tables, which is something that people have wanted for a long time, and for obvious reasons. And it's something we wanted for a long time, but it just took a lot longer than expected. But yeah, it just there's a big shift now in going from, like, in the way that I talk to the community about playing on the software, about their feedback, because it's really, there are still things like this that exist, but it's tough to consistently hear, like, you guys really need resizable tables. Why don't you have this? Why don't you have this? When I know that, I agree, and obviously no matter what we do, there'll be positive and negative feedback, but it's tough when the negative feedback is stuff that is true and is lacking in what your product has, and you want it there, and you've planned it to be there for years, but it's not there yet. And so it's getting to a place now where I think it feels really good to play on, and I think it's only going to get better from here. But that's the biggest shift for me, is that now I can say it feels really good to play on. And at the beginning, I would say, it looks great, and parts of it feel great, but you have to deal with this. You can't resize. You have to deal with this. So now, yeah, I don't know, can speak about it a lot more confidently.
I have a couple more questions about the posting that Sarah referenced, but first, just based on what you said, I want to get into some of that feedback and how it's been for you to deal with it. I think it was Ryan LaPlante that tweeted while you were streaming, and he said he could sense, how emotional you were, when kind of going through the ups and the downs and the peaks and the valleys of the site. Has this whole experience been a bit more emotionally draining than maybe you would have expected it to be?
Yeah, I have to be pretty emotional for people to realize that I'm emotional.
Yeah.
So, I knew it was going to be tough, and I knew it was going to be emotionally draining. But yes, it's been more draining than I expected, and it is like the feedback, especially on things that need to change, and I hate that we're not offering you this thing that we should have, that we're working towards having. It doesn't feel good. So I'm glad that we're getting there. We still have a lot more that we want to add, and right now the kind of equivalent is, why don't you have tournaments? Who would think that you shouldn't have tournaments? Obviously you should have tournaments. I know we should have tournaments, so we're working on it, and I wish that we had it already, but we don't, unfortunately.
I think one of the things that's been the most interesting from someone from the outside to see is, of course, being a player, you understand what players are looking for and what players want. But B, you've also been somebody who's been really vocal in the poker community. I don't know if I want to say really vocal, but you don't sugarcoat things or mess around, and because people respect and value your voice and opinion, I think what you're saying has a lot of sway. And so I can also understand not wanting to put out something or to offer a product until you feel like it's ready, until you feel like it meets your standards. But that being said, you have definitely made a lot of points in the last few weeks about some of the directions that some of the other major sites are going on. Or even in the last few months, that I think even Jeff and I were talking a couple weeks ago, where for me, sometimes you make points that I would never even think about or understand because you're a poker player, because you see so much of the meta going on. And I think that must impact all of your decisions. But I did want to talk a little bit about some of the things that are happening and how you see them, and how you hopefully see that affecting the way RunitOnce will run. First of all, being obviously this, you're talking about resizing tables and this stuff. Well, PokerStars just said that now they're not going to have any more than 4 tables running at one time on certain segments of their games. And I think you brought up a really interesting point, which is that this actually really affects in such a big way the segments of the games that are not technically affected by this decision or this choice. So can you kind of bring in the audience and explain to them the changes and why this actually isn't what it looked like at first, maybe?
Yeah. First, you said something at the very beginning of that I wanted to mention, because it did ring really true for me, which is one thing that we took pride in and have taken pride in as a company is that we are a company with a lot of poker players who do understand what poker players want. And that's actually the thing that's been so hard about having launched with a platform that didn't have all the things that we had designed in it, because it doesn't showcase that we know everything that poker players want. And so that's, along with everything else I said previously, that's why I'm really excited that it's coming along, and I'm going to be more excited when it's coming along further, so we can showcase that we get it. To your question about stars, so they put a table cap on. So I woke up and I saw a headline: PokerStars announces 4 table cap, and I was like, wow, it's a huge move. We have a 6 table cap. And we were actually deciding between 4 and 6. We put it up to a public vote before we launched, and the public wanted 6. And so obviously it's something I believe in, having a table cap. And but over the last couple of years, and a lot of the decisions that PokerStars has been making have led me to believe that kind of the people in charge believe that online poker is in its current form on the way out, and that what their company strategy is to kind of milk the existing online poker for all that they can, while pushing people towards poker type games that they think will last longer, and then pushing them towards casino and sports and things like that. So when I saw this headline, I was like, oh my God, this flies in the face of everything that I kind of feared that they were doing, because if they were trying to milk the current form of poker for all it's worth, they would not cap their tables, because capping their tables means capping their rake. It means people are not playing as many tables against each other. The game quality actually gets better. It's not as many regs battling regs, which means that they're competing for very small win rates, and then the rate, effective rake, is higher. I was really impressed, and then I read the article about it, and or their post about it, whichever. I don't know what I read, but it said, our regular tables are going to a 4 table cap. This won't affect Zoom games, and that completely changed what it meant to me. And this is something, like you mentioned, as being a poker player, I understood. Actually, this is something I got to understand more being a poker operator as we started doing research into what we call rake efficiency. And but by rake efficiency, basically mean when a I don't know what that is. when a I don't think it's me.
Is someone vacuuming?
I don't.
What is
no,
that?
no vacuums. That happened last time.
I know. I haven't.
There actually was literally somebody vacuuming last time.
All right.
Did it just go away?
Yeah.
It went away for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so for those of you guys in the chat, we're gonna keep going. But if there's a vacuum in the background, can you please let us know? Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Here we go.
No, it's all good. So the way that the poker ecosystem works, between there's net depositors, which are players who deposit more than they withdraw, net withdrawers who withdraw more than they deposit, and then there's the poker site who has a club. And basically the money flows from net depositors to the other two, and the split of who it flows to has to do with rake efficiency. So in a game with very high rake efficiency, that means that most of the money from the net depositors is going to the poker site, not to the winning players. In a game with low rake efficiency, most of the money is going to the winning players. Not very much is going to the poker site. And there's not really there's not a clear, universally agreed upon line, like the split should be this. But we have some of our ideas about what split should be, and it relates to game quality. It relates to win rates achievable, and our belief that games should remain beatable. And of course, beatable is a vague term. But anyways, what I learned after we did some research when we were starting up RunitOnce Poker is that Zoom has a much higher rake efficiency than non-Zoom tables. And this is because when for most games that start at non-Zoom tables, at regular tables, there'll be like one player who's a net depositor sits down, everybody's seating script fires up, and it gets filled with 5 pros. And so there's one losing player, 5 pros. So the ratio is 5-1. In a Zoom game, that one losing player sits down, and as many, 12 pros could join because it's not restricted. You're not restricted to a 6-player table. And so what ends up happening, and in addition to that, people play tighter at Zoom, especially recreational players, but some pros do as well for sure. And so what happens is win rates are much smaller at Zoom than at regular tables. And when win rates are smaller, rake efficiency is higher, which means that effectively, if the amount that people are depositing stays the same, less goes to the winners, more goes to poker stars. And so what they're doing by making this cap 4 tables but not having it affect Zoom at all is they're just pushing more people to Zoom, and specifically more pros to Zoom. And what that does is it actually decreases win rates further, increases rake efficiency more, so more money is flowing to poker stars, less is going to the winning players. And it's not going to reduce volume. It might even increase volume. I'm not really sure how that works out, but some players that would have been playing regular tables start playing Zoom. So it instead of flying in the face of what I was worried about, it just kind of falls in line with everything that I had been worried about.
I want to go back to Facebook for a question and back to RunitOnce for a question, just so this question doesn't disappear. It's from Barry Foley. What does Phil think of the poker players that are afraid to play on the site due to thinking it will be full of quality RunitOnce players? Now, you were saying in your latest post that your user base is a lot more recreational than you expected.
Yeah, so that was a very commonly held concern in the poker community, and for good reason. RunitOnce had the reputation, RunitOnce was a training site, and people who knew about our brand knew about it as a training site. I was a little bit less worried than most of them were because based on some analysis we did, it seemed that our brand reached further than just pros, further beyond just pros than people thought. But it's actually been, the games have been better than I expected. A lot of our policies are built to make the games better. Table cap, like I mentioned, a number of other things. Anyway, I don't want to give a 20-minute answer every time. But I think actually what has happened that I wasn't expecting and that we weren't expecting is that some of those policies, yes, they're helping because they're kind of recreational player friendly. They are making recreational players happy. They're making them move to RunitOnce kind of more than they otherwise would have. But they're actually discouraging pros from moving over to RunitOnce, which is not something we realized would happen. The biggest one from the bit of talking to people that I found is Splash the Pot, which, to give a brief description of, we give our rake back. We give 51% rake back normally, more during promotions, through Splash the Pot, which means that at random intervals, money gets dropped into the middle of the pot or as the hand is dealt. And then you play for it. Everybody has, an equal chance of winning, and it's 51% for everybody. I could go on about how good that is, but I'm biased and it's not the point. But what I've learned from talking to some people is that there are a lot of players who, the point of Splash the Pot in large part was to create kind of a new game format that hasn't been as solved, that is not as, that players are not playing as robotically. People haven't figured out there's room for, some players to have a theory of how you should play it and other players to have a different theory. And that's where kind of edges come from. It's how online poker used to be more like that. or poker in general, but we keep advancing. But it turns out that kind of like the twist on the game is discouraging people from playing because they're not comfortable with it. They haven't solved it. They haven't studied it, and they're worried they're going to make mistakes. And I mean, they are going to make mistakes, but so is everybody else. Everybody else is going to make bigger mistakes than you if you're a strong player. But unfortunately, I think it's discouraged a lot of players from playing. And normally, like, for the sake of the quality of games, it's actually, you could argue that it's good for sure that some pros are staying away, and that's why the games are better than I expected. But right now, as a small site, it's pretty bad for us because of liquidity, and we need games running more frequently so that when a new player shows up and wants to play 20 PLO, there are people sitting there playing. Because what happens, it's tough for retention if people show up, they deposit, they're looking to play a game, nobody's there at the hour that they want to play. And so in that sense, I think an ecosystem you need your recreational players, you need your pros, you need your multi-tabling grinders, you need all of it, I think. And we're discouraging some of them from playing, or I mean, yeah, we are, through in a way that we hadn't predicted.
What is for you guys when I've read a lot of what you've said about Splash the Pot, and I think there's very clearly a lot of thought that went into it and a lot of reasons behind it. What could you explain to us a little bit, especially as we're looking at what this 4-table max meant, for example, for PokerStars? What does 6 tables? Why does that feel like the right number for you guys? What have you guys looked at that made that feel like the right choice?
To be honest, we were split internally on 4 or 6. What a table cap does is it means that the people who would normally want to play 10 or 12 or 20 tables can't. They play fewer tables. Usually those players are pros. And so if a pro is playing 4 tables instead of 20, your games are going to be better. I thought that we should go with 4. And I was actually outvoted in the company. So more people thought we should go with 6. My vote's stronger. So we ended up deciding to just put it to a public vote, and 6 won out pretty decisively. So that's what we went with. I don't feel that strongly that 4 is better, and I don't think there's I don't have a very scientific way to go about it. The thing about all of these, like even Rake, but like so many game structure things and even Rake are actually, there's not like a right answer for how much Rake should be. It depends on the ecosystem and the environment, and it's going to change over time. Like I think that 10 years ago, higher Rake was okay than it is today, because the edges were higher, achievable win rates are higher. And if 10 years from now games are much tougher, they're the ratio of pros to non-pros goes up, like it kind of has been, then I think Rake needs to continue to be lowered to maintain that Rake efficiency, or a similar Rake efficiency like we were talking about earlier. So I think table cap is like, I don't know, 10 years ago, I think it was smart for PokerStars to allow 24 tables or whatever they did, because there was not a big concern about game quality, and they, made players happy and they made more Rake. But I think that today, as games are, as like the sustainability and the quality of online poker games are declining a bit, I think more things have to be done to preserve them. We have to get more serious about it, kind of like, like now we're finally getting more serious about like global warming and stuff like that. It's like, it's getting bad, guys.
Yeah,
we need to do something.
And you mentioned that poker ecosystem. You also say in your latest post, I haven't been empathizing sufficiently regarding the fragility of many poker players' careers and the resistance to change that comes along with that. How did you come to that realization? You also mentioned this is absolutely a failure on my part.
Yeah, I have always considered myself in touch with the poker community, being a poker player, having a ton of poker playing friends, keeping up on forums on Twitter, etc. But I think that what happened is, most of my close poker friends are people that I've known for a decade or more, and they've been around a while. And there's a newer generation of poker players that I don't know very well personally, that I'm not interacting with and hearing from. And what I didn't realize, and what I think is causing people to be worried about changing to a new site with different structures that they don't have the solutions for, is that achievable win rates are smaller than they used to be. And I think that the mentality of people who came up and kind of were naturally selected during the last 5 years, let's say, they're more studious, more diligent, more responsible, and I think more structured. And I think that the personality type that's done really well as of late and has made it kind of as grinders, they are, and this is a lot of guessing on my part as well. Like, I've talked to some people, but as you know, if you read the posts, I'm planning to talk to more people, and that's what I want to learn. But my guess is that in being more structured, more studious, and more responsible, which ends up meaning more careful in a lot of ways, I think that kind of people are, nervous about something they're not used to, and being careful to look, I know I've played 800,000 hands on PokerStars. I know my win rate is 1.8 big blinds per 100, and I know it's something around there. And if I go over to RunitOnce and they have these pots that I don't really know how to play perfectly, and they have anonymous tables, I'm used to using my HUD, how do I know that I can even win? And the answer, you can't know it, and that you have to go and find out and judge for yourself. But I get it, and I hadn't considered that enough. I kind of we were kind of idealistic in a lot of our ideas, and I think probably took too black and white of an approach of what, the community will figure this out and we'll see it the way that we see it. And I think it was kind of a failure on our part in terms of marketing and optics, because if you look at Splash the Pot specifically, I've been having discussions with people about this lately, or arguments, I should say. If you look at Splash the Pot specifically, we give 51% back, get splashed on the tables. Your expected value is to see 51% splash back and on your table. And then if you're average at playing those splash pots, your expected value is 51%. If you're better than average, your expected value is maybe 60, 70%, whatever. But I don't know, poker players deal with expected value all the time. I thought that anybody kind of serious about poker would see it that way. And we're actually, and if you compare it to, let's say, the Supernova program of old, where people might, you can grind a lot and get 50% rake back. You can if you work hard, but even if that's the case, your opponents who are casual players are getting 10% or 15% or whatever it is. So you're actually better off getting 51, 60, 70, whatever you're getting in expected value, but having your opponents get 50, even 40 if they're playing the pots worse. I thought that more people would see it that way, but they're seeing it as not everybody, but there's definitely a subset of people who are seeing it as, I'm not guaranteed any rake back. And they're viewing it more as they don't get any rake back, but there's this bonus jackpot element that maybe if they get lucky, they can win. And it's not small splashes happen all the time. Not all the time, but a lot of it's small splashes. It's not, we're not just throwing 1,000 big blinds in the pot every 5 hands or something. Those are very, very rare, the big ones. And so I don't know how to speak to them to convince them that they're going to see that expected value, and that all poker is expected value with variance. I'm having a hard time explaining it, and not to say that I'm not saying they don't understand. I'm saying they just don't see it the way that I do, and I took for granted that they would. And so I think also an element is a lot of people kind of like that game within a game of oh, how much rake back am I going to get this week? And we're missing that. And so we are we need to take a hard look at, like, because it's a disaster for a company to have good prices, but people not think they have good prices. That's like the exact opposite of what you want to do. So we do need to take a good hard look at what we're doing and how we're explaining it, or a combination of all that.
You mentioned a little bit about looking at your approach to marketing, which of course is, when you're dwarfed in some ways by the amount of money that specific companies are able to spend at this point, it is an interesting thing to try to look at and figure out. And even just I think streaming was something that a lot of people were talking about and had got a little bit of buzz going about the site. And I think that a lot of people also who then jumped on were kind of impressed and were like, oh, wow, lots of things have changed, or lots of things are happening. What is your guys' sort of approach moving forward, looking at how to market and how to, because I can even understand, as for a rec player, even when you say something like splash the pot, it's like, it sounds gimmicky and like ridiculous when you break it down, it really does make a lot more sense. But I can see how from a marketing perspective it seems like gambling. Yeah, we need to work on our messaging, and I think talking to a lot of players directly will help.
I think with me streaming last week or whatever, however long ago it was, did go very well. It did get our traffic numbers up. I mean, I'm not super familiar with Twitch, but I think we had pretty good viewership for not having a history of streaming and building up an audience. And I think we'll do quite a bit for us. And as a small company, like you said, that can't compete with the big dogs, I think it's going to have to fall on me a lot in terms of just like getting me being out there, going on podcasts, talking to people like you. Not that I don't enjoy it, I do. But yeah, I think a lot has to fall on me, and I'm okay with that. Another thing I've learned a lot about, I don't know, running the business or being more on the business side of things. And I think actually, I don't know, not that I assumed I would be an expert by any means, but as somebody who's like done very well in something that is very challenging, you sometimes think you're going to be able to figure things out pretty easily. And I just think I've learned that I'm not very good at marketing. I'm not well suited for it. I'm not going to just like study it and be smart and then be excellent at it. It's not a strength of mine personally. And so we have to lean more on our marketing department and not just like, I don't know. At the beginning, I kind of felt like, this is now veering off topic, but I felt like, there are all these aspects to running a business. It's managing people. It's the marketing aspect. There are a ton of different parts of the business, financial planning, this, that, and the other. And I kind of felt like I needed to figure it all out and be good at all of it. And as of late, I'm realizing that I'm not capable of being good at everything. It's just not going to happen. And I need to focus on the things that I feel I am good at and the places where I can have the most impact. And it actually coincides nicely with, when being able to start playing on the site and losing some access to some data that I previously had. It works well because like doing that, I can be a lot more valuable as the face of the site than I can at helping coming up with marketing ideas or helping to manage people. It's just, yeah.
And you're fine with, talking to all of these players on an individual level, because that's also something that you've encouraged. And those who are watching or listening, how do they get in touch with you? How do your players reach out?
Yeah, so if you head to runitonce.eu/news, you can find my latest post, which is called Talking to the Players. It'll explain a lot of things that we touched on here, and some of my impressions after playing and talking to some people. And at the end, there's a survey. It's a pretty quick survey. And filling it out is basically submitting yourself to chat with me. And so I'm going through all the submissions and talking to people one by one. I don't know. I mean, right now, if we didn't get any more submissions, I think I could get through it and talk to everybody eventually. I suspect we will keep getting submissions, and I won't be able to get to everybody, but I'm trying to talk to as many people as I can, and it's been enjoyable thus far. Just getting, it's nothing like statistically significant that I'm learning, because I'm talking to, a few people and getting their own perspective, but it's good to get, I don't know, there are some survey questions, but that's not like getting data on like X% of players say they like this and stuff. That's useful, but just actually talking to people directly and asking them questions about who they are, understanding who they are and their wants and their, what excites them, what they're afraid of, and what they're looking for is, I think, going to be really helpful. It's opened my eyes thus far.
You touched on something a little bit that I just thought was kind of interesting as being someone in the industry and seeing the industry evolve. Something that has surprised me a little bit has been a lot of the players from your time, I guess we'll call it that, have jumped on a lot of things which are unsolved, right? Like at this explosion sort of short deck, or when OFC was kind of getting big, I think there's a lot of players who are so interested in things that aren't solved because they want to explore that and they want to play against other great minds in those spaces and find that. And then, and even reading your tweet from earlier where you said, like I put half my bankroll on the line a couple times as I was coming up, which, may or may not be the appropriate bankroll management.
Yeah.
But that I'm interested. So your perspective maybe is that this more up and coming group of players who came up in what we might say is a harder time or a more solved time, that it's been mostly for them to be successful, they've had to have been more of a type of person who's less willing to gamble and less likely to play something which isn't solved. Is that we're looking maybe at these like the new generation of views?
Yeah, perhaps. I wouldn't necessarily say that they're less willing to gamble. I'm sure some of them are very willing to gamble. I think that the people who have kind of been naturally selected lately are more studious, and the people from my generation who were naturally selected and who rose the stakes, you could study and learn some things, but the tools were so much weaker back then that the people who succeeded the most were just the people who figured it out on the fly. And so the people that rose to the top were not necessarily people that worked hard and studied hard. Some were, some weren't. But they were people that could think very well and adapt to new situations and, maneuver in games that are brand new to them. And so it's why a lot of those people gravitate to games like that, because speaking for myself, I've never been good at studying poker, and I have never just like spent any amount of consistent time studying the game. I play and I watch videos and I talk to people, and that's how I learn. And so if I came up during today's time, I think I could have succeeded, but I don't think I would have thrived the way that, I did 10 years ago, or even, 6 years ago or whatever, just because the gap, like my skill set is only a small piece, well, not a small, but a smaller piece of the puzzle, right now than it was back then.
I want to ask one question from the chat, which came in a little while ago, but which I avoided, but which was for American players particularly. Of course, no one wants another Black Friday, and from what I've read, legislation is extremely slow and piecemeal, even if there are some developments in some states. Phil, as a poker player, a business owner, and a person, what's your take on the future for online poker and the industry in general, especially stateside?
Yeah, first the disclaimer, I'm not at all an expert on the legislation in the U.S. I don't think I know more than the average involved poker player in the community, but I can say as an operator, it's, getting into select states is a really big undertaking, not only because you have to pay licensing fees, and deal with that element of it, but also because we're fighting for liquidity in the rest of world market, fighting for enough liquidity in New Jersey is really hard. You have to go in there with a huge marketing budget, because otherwise you're going to have 3 people on your site at 10 a.m. And people aren't going to want to play. So I think that even as more states get at it, it's still a very big challenge. And what's an even bigger challenge for sites that are trying to make it in the U.S. as more and more states legalize it, is that there are some sites operating illegally in the U.S. And those sites also take players from the rest of the world, and they don't have to abide they don't abide by the same restrictions that the state by state licenses or regulators will make you abide by. And I think that it's just going to make it too tough, even for the big companies. I worry are going to have too tough of a time finding poker to be profitable businesses for them. And so I'm pessimistic, because even if it becomes legal in half the states, but they don't let you play with rest of world players, they require a lot of effort to be able to deposit more than $200 or $600 or whatever it is. A lot of things that are on not necessarily unreasonable asks of the regulators. It just is very, very tough for them to compete. And in addition, they're paying taxes to these states that the ACRs of the world are not. And so the unregulated sites that are operating outside of the law, or whatever you want to call it, are have higher margins, have larger player pools. They can offer lower prices because their costs are lower. And I think it's you can deposit $25K with Bitcoin even if they don't know you. I'm not suggesting that the states let everybody do that, but I am pessimistic about how it's going to go in the states. And I would suggest, if any regulators are watching, that where ethical and reasonable, I don't think New Jersey should say, you know what, don't check this guy's ID, let him deposit $20K with Bitcoin, that's fine. I don't think they should say that. But where possible, look to be a little bit, look to give a little bit within the frame of things that are ethical and reasonable and responsible.
Reasonable, something not notoriously in line with legislators or any of this. But
well, yeah, it's tough. They're not poker players, and so it's hard for them to come up with reasonable, to know what's going to be a big problem for the poker players or the poker site compared to something else, and it's tough. It's a tough job for a non-poker player.
Well, I, for one, even though I know marketing isn't maybe your main hustle, am really excited to see you out here doing the podcast, streaming, doing the hustle. I think the poker community is just happy to get more Phil Galfond if we can. So for those who are out there, for those who are listening, when they want to know when you're going to fire up a stream, when they want to know when you're heading to Costa Rica or wherever you're going, Canada, how do they keep up with you?
I mean, I think the best option is to follow me on Twitter or RunitOnce on Twitter, or to sign up to RunitOnce. Even if you don't deposit yet, just get your email address in there and you'll get email updates. But probably Twitter at Phil Galfond or at RunitOnce Poker. And I think that's the best. We'll always be updating that kind of stuff.
It's a solid Twitter, guys. It's a good follow. I'm going to say that. And you can also follow Phil's wife, who's also a good follow. Just saying.
She is.
Just putting it out there. If you're looking for the other half, the really juicy, dicey side of the Galfond family, be sure to also check out Farah. Anything else you want to say to everyone before I let you get on with your life?
Man, no. I really enjoyed the podcast. You guys ask great questions, so I don't have anything to add.
It was fantastic. You guys were great. Thank you guys out there, of course, also for joining us. And yes, you can rewatch this. It will be up on Facebook, and also the audio version will go live tomorrow after I get it all edited. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a very busy man with a beautiful, beautiful baby. So
thank you.
Go give some big wet anti-Chardonnay kisses, and let us know as things evolve. Keep us in the loop. We are more than happy to be part of your marketing team whenever you need us.
All right, then I'll be back on soon.
Perfect. Bye, darling.
Bye.